watching the Clippers Cancun Drawing Board today. Should be an interesting one. They don't really have a straightforward direction from here, but I wanted to ask to start, do you guys think their window is still open? And if so, how can they maximize that window?
I mean, it's a window that it might be open, it might not be. I think it's closing very quickly. Oddly enough, like let's be fair. Let's take a look at this a little bit perspective. Um, like I know we have like a negative perspective around this, but like let's be a little bit fair. So this year they had that time when they were the hottest team in the league. After they had that cold start with James Harden, they were the hottest team in the league. They really looked like they could beat any team and they could win the championship. And they've had that each of the last what 5 years or so. So in a way, that window's always open, and then they I guess the wind just shuts the window with an injury or something like that. Is most of the time what tends to happen. But either way, regardless, James Harden will be a free agent. They could re-sign him. They could not. Paul George is a player option, so he could sign and stay. He could sign and be traded, or he could just sign somewhere else. But if they want to keep this window open, here's a potential thing of what they want to do, or what they could do in my eyes. So you're looking at obvious. This is if Paul George were to stay. Paul George wants to stay in LA. He thinks he still has a good chance to win there with Kawhi. So one guy I like to look at is Tyus Jones. He's been shooting the three ball really efficiently. He's very he doesn't take risks with the ball, extremely high assist to turnover ratio, which could be great for a team that is very ISO heavy,
Yeah.
despite having James Harden. But to bring in a guy like Tyus Jones that will be able to make plays for everybody else and be that guy that distributes the ball and then let them either hit their shots or then go into ISOs from there. And he can still space the floor with the shooting. Another guy that could be interesting to sign along with him would be Malik Beasley. He's been shooting the lights out in Milwaukee and about 40% three-point shooter as well to keep the floor spaced for a heavy ISO team and then getting a playmaker like Tyus Jones. That this is one idea I have if they still think that window is open. And I think maybe one more ish. If you guys have thoughts on that, or if not, I can just move to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do like what you're th saying with Tyus. I think he could really help them out if obviously since Harden's a free agent, they just let him go. I think that could be a potentially very intriguing thing for them. You'd still have to figure out how to kind of run Westbrook with that roster. Ty Lue kind of seemed to not let him play the way he normally plays. So they'd have to figure that out. But interestingly enough, too, you were saying the Clippers are normally riddled with injuries. But the interesting thing is all of their stars played 68 or more games. And by all of their stars, I mean the four like all-stars they have on their team. Played
They
60
did look good this year.
games.
That's crazy.
They all qualified for an award. And they still, I mean, they had a good season, no doubt.
They did have a
Um,
good season, but the playoffs what matters, and Kawhi didn't play
Yeah, that's
healthy.
true.
Yeah.
I mean that's fair, but like I said, the regular season they were healthy. Kawhi obviously didn't play in the playoffs. George was struggling for half of the playoffs. Westbrook was not good either. So very interesting what happened there. But yeah, I mean I think Tyus could really help them out a lot. Like you said, he's very careful with the ball, play make first, and when you have a play make first guy like that, and you have Kawhi and George, and even Norman Powell who likes to shoot the ball too, that could very likely be a successful team right there. And you still have 2, 3 All Stars on that roster without star studying that too much, like we've seen with the Suns this season and the Nets in the past and stuff like that. So I think that could be a very intriguing path they could look at. And it obviously wouldn't even be super expensive. I mean, Harden's like 40 million. Drop that off, take Tyus, not for 40 million. I mean, he's a great player, but I don't see him getting that much money. So then you can use the rest of that to sign other good role players that you kind of lost with that Harden trade last season with some of those guys they lost in their depth. So that could be very intriguing, actually. I like that.
I love the idea of getting just another ball handler that um Tyloo trusts because he clearly didn't trust Russ at the end of the year. Um, I mean, and there's a question if Tyloo even stays this
There,
offseason, but
that's what I wanted to talk about.
I mean, the Lakers were interested. I mean, they still are, I think, but I don't know how likely that is. The Suns were interested. They ended up going with Budenholzer, but I don't
Surprised how
know.
fast they signed.
Yeah,
And it's, I
I
mean,
mean, he was
50 mil for
clearly
5 years
already
too.
hired before Vogel was gone, but
Yeah.
I think they're like, where there's smoke, there's fire. I don't know if Ty Lue wants to be in a situation like this, where, in my opinion, it is close. Like Marvin said, they were the healthiest they'd ever been since basically the first year they were together.
Mhm.
And then the playoffs, it's Kawhi's immediately injured. Paul George sucks. James Harden sucks. And
Westbrook
they
sucks. I mean, they all just fell
Westbrook
off.
Okay,
sucked.
but
And they
okay.
lost to a Mavs team that they were more talented than. The Mavs are really good, obviously, but they were more talented.
Yeah. Speaking of that, yeah, talent again, it's a team sport. Um, Going to the East Coast, the New York Knicks, they're not the most talented team, but they've played hard in the
Yeah,
Sixers. They beat them because the pieces fit around Jalen Brunson. And here's what Ty Lue's great at is managing, I think, star personality. I think he's amazing at that. That's what makes him one of the better half of coaches in the league. What he, I think, is kind of weak at is is that X's and O's part, and maybe that's because he's managing the personalities. But they're the most heavy ISO run team. The Dallas Mavericks, they run a good team defense, so they excelled against guarding that. And especially in a playoff
right.
environment, they excelled against that. And I think Ty Lue, for his sake, but also for the team, I think it's a win-win. I think for him to leave, I think it should be done, whether they're going for this chip this year or not. Especially because if
Right.
they're not, they're probably going to move away from a lot of the stars anyway, and they're going to kind of want to rebuild coach. I don't think Ty Lue is that guy. I think Ty Lue is a pretty good coach for going for a chip because, like I said, he's pretty good with stars. But I don't think with these type of stars, especially like this sounds like hate, but I think like he did it with LeBron. And LeBron's a really high IQ guy that can kind of run some of the X's and O's. But I feel like with the stars that they had there, they're not exactly the same thinkers as LeBron or Jokic type of, which is obviously the elite of the elite. So I think get him out of there would pretty ideal. The only problem that comes with it, of course, is again that continuity factor. But they've tried with him 5 years. He's been dealt a lot of bad hand for injuries, but I do think it's just the way they approached that strategy against the Mavericks. I don't think it was an effective strategy. I think again with that ISO is a big reason of why Russell Westbrook wasn't as effective as he could have been, um, especially at this point in his career.
Yeah.
That's how I
I
feel
think
about.
another, yeah, I think another factor in all of this is, I mean, like you said, I think Ty Lue got outcoached by Jason Kidd, which is not a good thing. I mean, I may be hating, but I don't like Jason Kidd as a coach that much. I think he's fine, but in general, I think just all the stars on that team uh, fell off in the playoffs almost every year. I mean, except Kawhi, but he never played in the playoffs.
Yeah, for real.
Um, so I think, in my opinion, changes need to be made. Changes won't be made uh, because they're kind of forced. And their hands kind of, it's everyone can see what they're trying to do. There's a new arena opening. They have no draft picks. It's a tricky situation. But let's say Steve Ballmer was like, "All right, I'm a smart owner. I know what my team needs. What would they do?"
I mean, if we're getting another option, I have one more option to keep this window open if you want to do that.
Yeah,
So
actually, yeah. Let's hear that first, and then we'll move on.
here's where I would take this. All right, Paul George stays. This is going to be so crazy. So Paul George would somehow want to stay, being aware that Kawhi would be traded, because Steve Ballmer, as you said, is a smart owner, decided to take it this route with the GM and whatnot. And they trade Kawhi for a package to the Atlanta Hawks. In this package, they would receive DeJounte Murray, they would receive AJ Griffin, and they would receive a 2024 first round picks via Sacramento and a 2029 first round pick directly from the Hawks. So two first round picks, DeJounte Murray, AJ Griffin is the package I have drawn up. We can discuss that package in a second. And then after that, they would also have enough cap space to maybe go if they want to go big time over the tax. If Steve, if Palmer wants to hit this last year of that window, which this will be the last year. Paul George on the last year of his contract, Russell Westbrook on the last year of his contract, Zubac on the last year of his contract, PJ Tucker on the last year of his contract, Terrence Mann on the last year of his contract. It would be that last window. So I don't even blame them for maybe just going, you know what, screw it one more year. And I think this would be a good way to set up their future while still going for this window. And I know without Kawhi sounds crazy. Maybe it doesn't work. I'm not saying it's a great idea, but on paper you would have DeJounte Murray running with Paul George. You would have a Terrence Mann, Zubac. Like it would be just a different look. It would be a point guard look. Probably have to switch coaching. And now, if you want to go over the tax, you can go after maybe a Pascal Siakam into the LA market. You're going to go with the tax. Now you have a much different looking team, but I think that's a good looking team. DeJounte Murray, Siakam, and you're setting yourself up for the future. Siakam isn't that old yet. DeJounte Murray's still young. He's at a really attractive contract. You're getting those picks. AJ Griffin is young. You're letting yourself be able to compete while building for the future at the same time. So I don't think it's a bad direction to go. If you can't get Siakam, Tobias Harris could be interesting on a good enough looking contract. Maybe even Klay Thompson on the right contract, maybe a 1 year, maybe a 2 year. And then I think Jay Crowder's always just, if you're going for a chip, Jay Crowder might be a good guy to have on your team.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
You could even look at Miles Bridges potentially. He could be a good filler for that spot, I think, too. But yeah, I mean, I do like what you're saying. Honestly, might as well make, like you said, make a trade with Kawhi, or trade Kawhi, and just kind of run out the last year of some of these guys that they're kind of trying to win that chip with. If not, I mean, you have Highland on restricted next year. I think you keep him. And I'm sure, right, if all those guys are going out of there, he'll be happy to stay. He'll get a bigger role. Then you have Coffee too, who is unrestricted, but I'm sure he'll stay too. Because I mean, at that point, right, these young guys hopefully can really get a bigger role and start. I mean, at that point, it's almost a rebuild for them, for the Clippers. Obviously, they don't have many clips, so it will be still tough. But I do like just kind of letting those young guys get those minutes. And even this year, you could start kind of ramping up some of their minutes, let them get comfortable. And I mean, we've seen Coffee. I mean, he was also shit in the playoffs. But I mean, we've seen Highland. He's a hooper. He can hoop whenever. Give him minutes. Let him do his thing. So I'm really curious to see what the Clippers do, whether they wait it out for 1 year or they just say, hey, new arena, new kind of just environment for us. Let's just let George or trade George, trade Kawhi, let Harden leave. I'm curious to see what Ballmer thinks is the best idea. So that'll be fun to look out for, I think.
I mean, that's what I like about this trade is that it kind of lets them compete and still keep their future. But
At least what they have left of it.
I mean, I don't think. I mean, I think it is a deal that they should make. I don't know if they're better at all. But I don't think they need. I mean, yeah. So maybe like you're like, oh, this is the last year of a lot of their deals, or they're aging, or whatever. So let's just go all in, whatever. But like you're going all in on a product that has shown it's just not working, and that doesn't really make sense to me. So yeah, and I don't think they're better than any of the West like top tier teams with that squad in general that we talked about. I think they're still a playoff team for sure. But
DeJounte Murray, Pascal Siakam, Paul George, whoever they want to put.
I mean, I think they'd be good. Like, yeah, I think they'd probably be in the same position.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a competitive position. I think the problem is Kawhi is a false sense of hope, and they lose that false sense of hope. And I think they can just play in the playoffs. They want the way they want to play, the way they've been playing all season. And that's the problem with Kawhi. It's because you rely on Kawhi because you're used to relying on him because you should, but then he doesn't show up in the playoffs because he's just literally not physically on the court, or if he is, he's only a shadow of himself.
Yeah. It also makes me question how valuable is Kawhi? You know, like, are people going to be really into the idea of trading for him?
I mean, here's the thing.
I think the Hawks will. because they're kind of desperate.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, imagine. I just love that idea. We're not talking about the Hawks here, but for once, so Kawhi Leonard has 3 years left on his contract. It's a long time. But like if we're talking about a Hawks team that struggles with defense, to put Trae Young and Kawhi together because we know that guard duo doesn't work for Trae, but to put a different type of player, a wing forward type of player next to Trae, who's an elite defender, I think it could be attractive. That's all I'm saying. I think it could be attractive. It has
Yeah,
something that could be there.
I don't hate the trade for Atlanta at all. I mean, compared to what they have right now. Um, and I mean, I don't hate it for the Clippers either because I'm not in the Kawhi Leonard business if I'm the Clippers anymore. I mean, I'm not in the business of having four 35-year-old stars that are hurt often.
And no
Especially
picks.
with all these young teams that are like, oh, we're going to play defense as hard as possible, and we're going to run, and we're going to shoot the ball really well. And then the Clippers are over here like, hey, let's take up all 24 seconds of the shot clock and try to
With
get back
ISO
on
ball.
defense. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't know. It's kind of an imperfect model for me at this point. So yeah, I like the idea of getting younger just in general. But do we have any other Kawhi trades? I know Marvin, you had one.
Yeah, I just had a straight up one. Obviously, like you guys said, who knows what his value is, but there's rumors about Jimmy potentially wanting out. So I just have a straight up deal, Kawhi for Jimmy Butler. Who
Mm.
knows if the Heat accept that? Money works out perfectly. Like we said, who knows what Kawhi's value is? I could definitely see the Heat being like, "Hey, no, we love Jimmy. He actually kind of wants to stay here anyways. We don't really know what we're getting out of you either, so it's not really necessary or make any sense for us." But I thought it was kind of just an interesting deal that could be. I mean, both these guys are definitely hoopers. They know how to play defense. Also have their fair share of injuries. Um, but yeah, I feel like that would be a curious for me. That's just a curious kind of trade that I was like, huh, like that would work out theoretically.
Right.
As in could be a successful trade if both teams accept it.
I like the idea. I actually like the idea for both teams. So I'll just do the Heat really quickly. We saw it work in Toronto where there's like already a culture established, and then he just went in, replaced the best player, and he was like, "I'm not going to be necessarily the leader. I'm just going to be the best player. I'm going to perform. I'm going to sit out every other game, and it's going to work." You know, because they already had a great team, and it worked in Toronto. So theoretically, I think it could work in Miami because, like, I think Bam is kind of like the leader of that team. Or they and Spoelstra is already a great coach, and he's somewhat a leader in himself. And that just the supporting cast is awesome, or theoretically, it is awesome.
A healthy supporting
They're
cast.
often hurt, yeah. Um, and so I kind of like the idea of just like Kawhi stepping in there. It's not my team, it's not my culture. It's I'm just playing basketball. And he could play 50 games. We'll see if it. I mean, Jimmy Butler's doing the same thing anyway.
Exactly.
The rest of the team has to stay a little more healthy. And then, but ultimately for the Clippers, Jimmy, he also, uh, you know, he usually plays in the playoffs. I mean, I think this is his first year really missing playoff games, but he's also out for significant amount of time in the regular season. But he just in the playoffs, he just brings a different energy that
Mhm.
no one on the Clippers, I mean, besides
Yeah,
Russ,
he's
really,
one of those
but
leaders.
Russ wasn't playing well, so it didn't really matter.
That would be fun.
Um,
Jimmy and Russ.
I mean, that would be some intense action there. But yeah, just someone to increase the intensity, up the intensity in there. And he's completely different from everyone else on that roster. He rises in the playoffs. Well, Paul George, playoff P, way off P, pandemic P, I don't care. He often declines. James Harden, I mean, this is assuming you bring him back, or even if you don't, use that cap space elsewhere or that money elsewhere. But say
Sure.
you do bring him back, he also declines in the playoffs. Jimmy Butler does the opposite. He brings the energy. He's a good defender. Um, so I think regular season you'll probably get around the same results. But I like the idea. I mean, just the politics of it. The trade probably doesn't happen, but I I do really like the idea for the fit for both guys. What do y'all think?
100%. I agree with you. Actually, I first it did exactly what you said. The politics of it seem off. It
Mhm.
seems like you're trading almost the same player for the same player.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like breaking it down, they're literally both small forwards. They're both 6'7". They're 5 pounds off in weight. Kawhi Leonard is 2 years younger than Jimmy, which again also kind of makes this attractive for the
Miami.
Heat, but he's obviously a little bit more banged up. Most of the time, he has 3 years left on his contract. Jimmy has two. And so, yeah, exactly. And to Deacon's point, so you bring in a player like Kawhi Leonard. He's not a very vocal leader or anything like that. You bring him into a culture that's already very much existent. It's already very hardcore. He doesn't have to carry the culture. He doesn't have to lead the culture because he's not that guy, and he doesn't need to be.
yeah,
That's perfect for him. He can just play the superstar role that he is, and that's a perfect fit. And to Deacon's point too, he can hopefully kind of sit so he can be healthy in the playoffs, and that could be a dangerous squad. And then Jimmy Butler, it's like the opposite of the Clippers. You bring him into this kind of star, privileged team. I mean, I'm
hmm
not there in the practices. I don't know. I'm not telling you in fact how it is, but they seem to be lacking quite a bit of culture and energy. It
yeah,
seems to be, and
for
they
sure.
have obviously they have four, all NBA kind type of guys. They have in their primes were MVP winners, MVP caliber players. So they are privileged. They make a lot of money, and kind of to bring up a little bit of just energy, responsibility, and work ethic and things like that, particularly around playoff time when it's most needed. So I think this could be an extremely interesting trade, just because you're almost trading two of the same guys, but it's just really the personality, and it's those things you don't see, the behind the scene things, those intangibles, that is what matters in this trade, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm just imagining a lineup of Russ, Norman Powell, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, and throw in whatever center you want, and just the intensity of that lineup with Russ and Jimmy Butler and Norman Powell. I mean, I don't know. I think it could be really fun. Um,
I mean,
but
look at the Knicks right now. Again, I just brought this
yeah,
example up earlier, but you're pretty much getting a Knicks with way more star power in that case.
hmm
Right now, the
yeah,
Knicks are so good because they bring in that energy. The Clippers would bring in energy with like bona fide stars,
yeah.
given they're healthy.
Yeah.
Sadly, NBA probably doesn't work like that, so we'll see. But Lauren, you got any other Kawhi Leonard trades that you
Oh
like?
boy, I got some Kawhi Leonard trades for you. I mean, this is pretty
Yeah.
much a Paul George will probably like in these scenarios leave, and
Okay, so just like a blow it up
I
scenario.
mean, even if Paul George, I think this Hawks trade I just mentioned, I think that's a good idea. And like, regardless of what happened, if Kawhi stays, I
Right,
think that would be a great trade regardless, just because
right.
of what the picks they get and the player contracts, etc. But another interesting trade here, um, it would be with the Sacramento Kings, a team that was a
Okay.
3 seed the season before, greatly overperformed. They looked like the future was all theirs, and now they made it as the 9 seed, I think, in the play-in, and were eliminated in that second game of the play-in, so didn't even make the playoffs from a 3 seed. So really disappointing. They're obviously missing a superstar. You cannot run it back with this exact same squad. I don't personally think you can. With your with those guys being Fox and Sabonis, I don't think that's enough in this league to
Especially
be
because they might
competitive.
lose Monk.
True.
Yeah, especially
Agree.
with losing Monk. So Kawhi Leonard, just send him over there. Now you get a package as the Clippers. Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, two first round picks, 2025, 2026, and then also in 2025, a second round pick. So pretty upcoming picks. The Kings are going all in. Harrison Barnes is pretty much replaced by Kawhi Leonard, which is an obvious upgrade. I think if that team healthy with a for the Kings perspective, that team healthy would be dangerous. Fox, Kawhi, Sabonis, just those three guys, and whoever you have with those guys will shoot
Keon Ellis.
over.
That's what I was
Ellis,
gonna say.
Mitchell, whoever else you have on that team that decently fits in there, I think it's gonna be a really scary roster because you have a star guard, small forward, and a center. So you have all those three. You hit all those different points on the court with just bona fide stars that I think could fit really well together. And then obviously we're talking with the Clippers here. You get Keegan Murray. I He had that 42-point game or whatever. I think it was during that game afterwards where Mike Brown was like, he was talking about like, damn, like you have all these moves, and Keegan Murray told him like, yeah, I've got way more moves too. Like Keegan Murray he was one of my favorite draft prospects in that draft, because he can do a lot, and I feel like if he went to this Clippers team, in somewhat of a rebuild or retool mode. I think he's already been getting better. He could just get that much better. He could be awesome. Just an awesome piece for them. And you get very soon you get draft picks, Harrison Barnes. He's just there. I mean, he's not a bad player. I mean, why not? His contract's
I
not
mean,
ugly.
we see Keegan Murray like every preseason, and he's like, "Oh, this dude, he's going to win Most Improved Player." Because he just, he has the green light, and he's just awesome. And then isn't it pretty funny, just like looking back at the draft, and the Kings picked him at 4, and everyone was like, "What are you doing?" Like that was me. I was like, "Pick the better player in Jaden Ivey." Anyway, I was
I
very wrong,
loved it,
but
bro. I was
yeah,
hoping he would slide to, I think, 7 was the Spurs pick or 9. I was hoping he would
yeah,
just keep
9 was
falling
Spurs.
back. I wanted him so bad.
Yeah, I mean, because at one point it looked like he could really drop because like Shaden Sharp and Jaden Ivey, but anyway, we're getting off
For
track. But
once,
Yeah.
the Kings knew what they were doing in the draft.
for
Yeah.
once, yes. I think the year before they picked Davion Mitchell, which
That's
been rough.
true.
But he's solid, but
I like him.
he's not a top 10 pick. But at the end of the day,
Not yet.
if you're the Clippers and you can get Keegan Murray for Kawhi Leonard, I would do it. I think I like you said, I think he has a lot more to show than what he has shown. Especially in a more I mean, I think he's arguably top 10 3-point shooter in the NBA, and then I think he has potential to create his own shot, and I think he has playmaking potential and all that stuff. And for the Kings, like you said, you're going to get an elite defender, which they don't have a ton of. I think Keon Ellis and David Mitchell were their only ones. Harrison Barnes was fine. But yeah, I think that would be a good move for both teams. Um, it would suck giving up Keegan Murray though.
Yeah.
That's really for the perspective. Like we saw them be a 3 seed. If they think
Yeah,
they're close, but they're star away. And I personally like I'm not a Kings confident, but I think this would be a pretty dang good trade. I think this could make the Kings could give them a pretty good shot.
right. Yeah. I mean, just that. I mean, De'Aaron Fox and Kawhi Leonard combination on offense would be pretty lethal. I think another question is Sabonis defense. And if you're just adding more elite perimeter defenders around him, that's how you help Sabonis out. Because right now, everyone's getting the paint, and Sabonis is like, I'm not that great of a defender. I'm not. How am I stopping all these guys? But if you add more elite perimeter defenders, put Keon Ellis out there, put Kawhi out there, I think it could really help Sabonis out. And De'Aaron Fox also took a step up in defense this year, I think. So I think just the more good defenders, the better for the Kings.
For sure.
Well, should we move on to my Paul George trades, or do you guys have any other Kawhi deals?
I think
I have one more Kawhi deal actually. Right here, do you see this team? This boy Russell Westbrook was not him, but OKC Thunder could be an interesting trade target. We
Mm,
talked about Kevin Durant going there. He's kind of in that position where he could like it's a wing guy. I think Kawhi Leonard could be a great fit. Elite defense. Imagine Kawhi. He doesn't also have to carry. Maybe they could help with injuries. And just another star to finish out a game. So
yeah,
I think for OKC could certainly be attractive depending on how they do, of course, this season. Obviously, more important, the Clippers' perspective. So what do they get here? Right, we're looking to kind of build into the future here. You get Josh Giddey, Usman Jeng, Aaron Wiggins, and I just put in 3 first-round picks. It's a pretty loaded package, mostly because the Thunder have a lot of assets. It doesn't have to look this way; it can look a lot of different ways. This would certainly be, I think, attractive for the Clippers. Wiggins and Giddey only have 1 year on the contract. Jang still has 2. Jang had a lot of potential. Aaron Wiggins a lot of potential. And then you get 3 first-round picks of 2 of them for 2024. So they're coming up right away. Those picks for the Clippers, and then the 2025 first-round pick. There'll be a Houston and Clippers getting one of their picks back finally, and then a Philadelphia pick. So this could just be a very interesting trade for the Clippers in that way. It doesn't make them very good with those guys at all. And alongside of that, you can get potentially Siakam we talked about, Malik Monk maybe, and then even I think more importantly, personally, this in my opinion might be the biggest free agent this coming season, Emmanuel Quickly. I think he might be my personally my most important free agent this coming season, just for the potential he has, how young he is, how good he's been. And he would also fit again with that young squad. And I have this big warning if they're going to kind of rebuild, be careful. You don't have draft picks. And even if they're
Yeah,
going to go for it one more year, they're in LA. That's a great thing. So you can at least maybe get free agents, but just be careful. And this
right.
might be a good way to get your picks back, get some young guys, and and again also with free agents, like quickly, don't blow your money on the wrong guy. Or you're going to be screwed for a long time because you don't have picks.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to remember that they are in LA. Like, I don't think it'll be that hard to get free agents. So yeah, if you're going for that type of package where you're like, oh, let's go young, let's shed a lot of salary. Josh Giddey, he's having a rough time in the playoffs right now,
Hmm.
or particularly against the Mavericks. But it's a weird fit for him in Oklahoma City. I think in a new situation he could thrive. Usman Jane, Finals MVP or G League Finals MVP. Uh, I still think he's a lot of potential. He's just on a loaded roster, filled with young guys. And Aaron Wiggins, as a Thunder fan, I wouldn't trade him for LeBron James, but I'm sure Sam Presti would consider it. So yeah, I love the package for the Clippers. Again, uh, I mean, I think you're getting three excellent young players that have their own deficiencies and their own advantages. And I think in LA, you could always get a free agent. Build up this young core and then get free agents to come and help that young core compete for championships.
And what a time to do it. New arena, new logo. Be kind of
Yeah,
a fun time to bring in some new guys,
no worries.
draft first rounders.
Moving on to my Paul George deals. This is sign and trade scenarios. If they are no longer looking to bring him back, or he's just no longer looking to come back, might as well get some pieces out of it. And so my first trade that I came up with, this was inspired by my frustration with watching Josh Giddey be a minus 20 in 11 minutes last night. But so this came from just my deepest, darkest moments. But it's very similar to your Kawhi trade. It's just Paul George for Josh Giddey and Kenrich Williams. Obviously, sign and trade, you're not going to get as much value in return. It's mostly just like salary.
I'm really curious.
Let's hear
So I'm assuming if Paul George were to be interested in the sign trade, I'm
it. Yeah,
assuming you would give him the max of possible from the Clippers. And then so
yeah.
for how many
It's a
years?
lot of money.
Like a 4 year.
I mean, presumably. I mean, I think he would want full 4 year, fully guaranteed, and that would be tough for the Thunder. But like, can you imagine how good that team would be? But anyway, um, I mean, for any team, I'm really suggesting it's kind of a burden to take on Paul George contract because he's going to be old. You know, he's going to be like 37, 38 by the time this contract's up. But you're kind of betting on like within the next 2-3 years how good you're going to be with him, and if you can maximize him as kind of like a third, second option. So yeah, this first one's just Paul George for Josh Giddey, Kenrich Williams. Um, this is to get the Thunder so that the Thunder can get him with that max money coming in. Because they have like 30 million in cap space, so they need a little bit more to fully get Paul George in there. But Clippers perspective, everything we talked about with Josh Giddey, you kind of put him in a new role, put him as a point guard. You know, you just get young talent return. Kenrich Williams, kind of a hyperactive wing, something that you don't have a ton of since the Harden trade. Um, so that's one idea. We don't have to talk about it a ton since we kind of already talked about it.
I mean,
Uh,
I do actually want to talk about it a little bit. I do have one thought. For
sure.
one, just I know you're a Paul George lover and OKC lover, but I just think speaking to you as an OKC like fan, I just feel like this would be horrible for OKC. They're going to be burdened
Uh,
with Paul George contract. They're going to have to re-sign guys. They're going to lose a guy like Kenrick Williams, who they would not have to re-sign for another 3 years. They'll be
yeah,
burdened
yeah,
with Paul George contract. And personally, and I know I've been the one like giving Kawhi Leonard type of trade to Kevin Durant, but those are like bona fide superstars. And Paul George, I feel like he's again based off his playoff performance, etc. He's not really that good. So it's almost like what is the difference between him and J Dub? Oh, I know what it is. He's more of a um what's the word? Not privileged, but he's kind of a guy you're gonna have to give the ball to an extent. He's kind of a guy that now you have a star on your team, but he
Yeah.
doesn't at the same time bring the same value that other stars might to a team that's already that good. So you're kind of shaking up the chemistry for a guy that hasn't been that good recently, and then you're also burdening your entire. You're losing for one young guy that you could have to resign in 3 years to be perfect, or like Kendrick Williams getting 6 million for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
But now being stuck with Paul George, like you said, on a big contract for the next while, I'm sure they can get rid of it with their draft picks, but I feel like it's not really actually putting them in that great of a situation.
Well, like I said, this was made in my darkest
Fair,
moments,
fair.
watching Josh Giddey stink the bed. And yeah, if OKC does make a deal, I'd rather it be like a Denny Avdia type, just like not like a all-star, but just like a really solid role player. But from the Clippers perspective, I think it's like, oh, you get younger. If you're going to get something in return for Paul George, I think you want it to be a young guy. Um, but it's not the best deal, and I think I just threw it out there. I think this next deal I'm about to propose is much more favorable, maybe for both sides. We'll see.
All right, let's
Go
get to
for
it.
it.
Actually, if you're not a fan of Paul George's contract, so maybe you won't like this, but this is for the New Orleans Pelicans. We already know Brandon Ingram is likely to be traded, and I think if the Clippers want to capitalize on an opportunity to get younger, Brandon Ingram's also another guy, and Brandon Ingram's on a 1-year deal, but also you're in LA, so I'm sure he wouldn't mind extending there. It's a nice city. This is Brandon. I just can't stop saying Brandon Miller. This is Brandon Ingram and Larry Nance, which kind of hurts for Paul George. For the Pelicans, you're getting a more consistent. Paul George isn't that consistent, but he's more consistent than Brandon Ingram as the second option. And you're kind of freeing up that also just another playing time slot for one of your young guys who they kind of had trouble finding minutes for points in the season with getting rid of Larry Nance. And for the Clippers, like they didn't really. Ty Lue loves to play small ball, and they didn't really have the center to play small ball with, or the forward to play small ball with. And Larry Nance is kind of perfect for that role. He can't shoot threes, but he's good everywhere else. And you just get a younger, worse version of Paul George and Brandon Ingram, who I think the idea of Brandon Ingram is as a secondary guy. And he hasn't been for most of his time in New Orleans just because Zion's been hurt. So I do like the idea of it.
I mean,
Not bad, bro. I mean, I like it honestly for both.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. Did you say so? It's straight up. Oh, it's Nance and Ingram.
for
Yeah,
George.
for Paul
Phoenix.
George.
It's weird for from the Clippers perspective, almost as far as like, all right, like I guess we get some kind of return, so just losing Paul George straight up, and we
Yeah,
don't want to sign any other free agents, and we want to try Ingram and Larry Nance. And like I don't know, I don't hate it 'cause like you said, obviously Ingram's not bad. I am an Ingram fan, but at the same time, I almost feel like if I was the Clippers, like just let him walk and just sign some free agents. But
mm-hmm.
it's not bad. I don't hate it for either team, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just I mean, like you said, I mean, I don't think the Clippers necessarily lose anything in that. Ingram and Paul George, I think it's almost like the Kawhi Jimmy trade. I think they're very similar players.
Right.
Like you said, they do get a nice stretch five that they can potentially play smaller ball with, which could be potentially really nice for them. But yeah, I mean, I don't see necessarily anything wrong with that trade.
Yeah. And like I said, it's kind of a lateral move for both teams. So I don't know how likely it is. If you're trading Brandon Ingram, in my eyes, for the Pelicans, it's probably for guard or maybe a star big because they are moving off Valanciunas, it looks like.
It's true.
But it's a move. So
It's a
there's that.
move. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, my final one, and it's kind of an interesting one. I mean, you're getting a lot worse if you're the Clippers, but this is just going to be Paul George for John Isaac, straight up. The Magic have money, just to sign Paul George straight up, so they don't even have to do sign and trade. So this is just like we're just going to open up even more cap space to get more of what we need. And then for the Clippers, John Isaac can play small ball 5. He's probably the best defender in the league for the minutes he gets, just like off the bench. He's insane. And it's not really an upside play if you're the Clippers. It's just like if we're losing Paul George, we might as well just get something. You look very
It
concerned.
makes no sense for the Clippers. Like for the Magic, I like this a lot. This is an awesome deal, and I'm a much bigger Magic fan than Clippers. So please do this trade because it makes no like the Clippers are losing Isaac, great defender, awesome. But Paul George is a pretty good defender, so that's fine. They don't. It works out really well for the Magic and for what they're needing. I mean, there's issues there, but anyway, we're talking about the Clippers here. So Jonathan Isaac has 1 year left on his contract, so there's no really guarantee there. His upside it seems to have been fairly reached. He's an elite defender and will fit that role and do that to an excellent capacity. But if they're keeping Kawhi Leonard in the situation, possibly re-signing James Harden, you're pretty much running it back with the same team, except for you just lost a superstar in Paul George for just a defender. And it's not like Paul George was not the defender that was good. It's just like to me, again, in this situation, much more than the last one. Just let Paul George walk and just go please sign free agents if you're choosing. That might fit better. Might be I mean, I think it'll be a free agent, which would be nice, so you're not stuck with him. But then why even take him on? You're not even taking on like a guy with high potential or a guy that's the piece to what you're missing. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, I guess you like you said, small ball 5, sure. But do you even want to run small ball 5 if you don't even have Paul George in your roster? It's just like then who's even your lineup? It just doesn't really seem to make sense to me.
Well, yeah. So
Maybe I misunderstood.
I mean, it doesn't make sense because losing Paul George for nothing, or just losing Paul like if they're not going to extend Paul George, they should have traded Paul George. At the end of the day. Um, and I think also this deal, it's like you don't know if you can get a better guy than Isaac in free agency. I mean, there are certainly better guys, but you don't know if you could actually get them. So you're just getting something for Paul George. And if you want to keep Kawhi, Harden, and keep this core competitive, then Isaac is a really nice complementary player. He played good minutes for the Magic, and I think he could be nice. I don't think it's a move where you get better by any means. I mean, you probably get a lot worse, but it's a move that keeps you with a competitive player instead of like a guy that's like a Josh Giddey, which is a young potential swing guy.
I'd
Which
rather have a draft pick or a young out potential. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, yeah, I think if Paul George is going to walk to the Magic, I don't think there's a reason unless you have free agents lined up. I don't think there's a reason not to take on Isaac though. Even if you don't plan on keeping him, I think a team will be willing to give up a draft pick for him.
Yeah. No. If you don't get a better deal, I mean, it's like, why not, I guess. It's like we talked about, free agents aren't crazy, but certainly want to explore that market. But if you know you're not going to land anybody, which again, like we talked about earlier, it's LA, there's a good chance you can probably get somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's like kind of like worst case scenario, or like nothing else is panning out, there's no harm in this trade. I just think you can do better. I just think almost every other option might be better. Not that this one's bad.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Any more
All
trades?
right. Well, if that is all we have for the Clippers, that was a long episode, but Clippers,
That's all we have.
they have a lot to unpack. So
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so good luck to the Clippers. I am certainly not envious of your situation. If you guys have any thoughts, suggestions, drop them in the comments, leave a like, subscribe. We'll see y'all later.